So we got a few things that we need to talk about leading into the market tomorrow. So as you may have seen, depending on if you got Truth Social, Trump had a little bit of a post to delete over there where he was pretty much threatening to block the Strait. Now he's kind of trying to flip the one leverage that Iran has over this whole war that's taking place, and that is the Strait, which allows oil shipment to get through, in which we receive about 20% of. And what is this causing? A massive, massive strain on that supply and disruption on that oil and energy space. So definitely want to look at that because it's going to play heavily in tomorrow's volatility. And if you haven't seen it, I literally just looking at a few things, it popped up, said breaking news, the Dow is down 400 points. And it's likely due to the fact that Trump and the US and Iran have been in negotiations for 21 hours and not one resolution in sight. So let's come over here and let's go and read this article and let's look a little bit into what it says, okay? So the title, Trump says US Navy will blockade Strait of Hormuz after ceasefire talk end with no agreement. But before we get into this, if you've been keeping up, Iran said, look, we're not agreeing to nothing. We don't care about no negotiation until you guys agree to compensate us for all this damage that you guys have caused. And this thing is going on almost 2 months since it started in February. And they look, they retaliating. They want revenge. Even when the ceasefire happened, there was 2 week agreement, right? Here come Israel. Well, apparently their own agenda still carrying out attacks, and of course they've been trying to get these things negotiated, and it's just not happening. And I think honestly, regardless of what's being said in those meetings, I just don't think Iran wants to negotiate anything. Okay. And Trump has been telling us over and over, it's almost done. They're winning this war. They're in control. Everything that he has told us has been contradicted by something that has come out in the news, something that's happening that just kind of creating this ripple effect of things. And it just pretty much shows he don't have the control he keeps telling us that he has. And Iran is doing a very good job of exposing that. So this here says President Donald Trump on Sunday said the U.S. Navy would swiftly begin a blockade of ships entering or leaving the Strait of Hormuz after U.S. Iran ceasefire talks in Pakistan ended without an agreement. And Iran stated too that they will retaliate if there are any military ships coming through that strait. The market is going to be crazy because this was the main thing of why I wanted to go ahead and make this video. It's because it says Iranian ports beginning Monday at 10 a.m. So U.S. Central Command announced that it will blockade all Iranian ports. So tomorrow, 10 in the morning or 5:30 p.m. in Iran. So that's 10 o'clock for us in the morning. And we know the markets are just not opening it up between that 9:30 or 8:30, depending on what your time zone is. So that's going to cause a lot of gap downs potentially happening on tomorrow. And the fact that the Dow is down 400 points already, if you're not in futures, you have the ability to trade futures starting at 5 p.m. on Sundays or 6 p.m., depending on your time frame. Okay. So yeah, that's where we are right now. And I want to be sure that you guys are kind of on the forefront of that because whatever your game plan is, we might have to pivot a little bit for how things might go down. And there's also has been talks that Iran was charging a toll for ships that were coming through, and they were being mad selective about who they was letting through too. Whereas China and India were the only two that they were letting through on that strait. So these are going to get very, very, very interesting on tomorrow. And so definitely keep all of that in mind with how you go about your trading on tomorrow and facilitate all that into your game plan. Okay. Now, let's come over here and let's read on some live updates that we have at this moment with the market. Dow futures dropped 500 points. Now, I didn't say 500. It was just 400. So what time is it? It's 6:25 my time. This here dropped at 6. Okay. So this is actually a different article from what I was reading. And also it's a live update. So it was 400 points just about 30 minutes ago, maybe 30, 45 minutes ago. So that just basically shows we're still coming down. Dow Jones Industrial is down 517 points so far. The S&P 500 has lost 1.1%. NASDAQ 100 futures has shedded 1.2%. This here is steadily increasing. When I first was looking at this, these things were sitting at 1%, 400 points, and another 0.9%. So we definitely are going to see the market down come opening tomorrow with futures coming down the way that they are, especially since I was just sitting here reading this thing when it popped up as breaking news. So we are definitely going to have to, I literally have my entire game plan over here for tomorrow. Once I get done over here, I gotta go and do some changing up and pivoting. And listen, if the markets are too choppy, if the volatility is like in a manner that you just can't handle, don't try to chase anything. Don't try to chase the bottom because you just never know what happens. We've seen it time after time when it comes to Trump. The markets are in shambles. Trump comes out or his parties come out and say something, the market shoots up out of nowhere. You're stuck holding the bag because you were counting on things to come down. That's understandable. It's reacting to what you see on that market. But sometimes we just never know how that they're going to try to play this thing. And anytime the state of the market is in shambles the way that it has been, especially since this war started, Trump has come out, said something, even though we knew it wasn't true. And what happened? The market reacts. Those are just a few things that I wanted you to keep on your radar with that. Okay. Now, the final thing that I want to look at is that they have an emergency Fed and Treasury Department meeting tomorrow. But hold your horses. It ain't got nothing to do with oil, nothing to do with inflation, nothing to do with rate cuts, nothing to do with this geopolitical tension. Y'all, it has everything to do with cybersecurity and AI. And that cybersecurity and AI concern has led to Scott Bessent calling the top CEOs of the biggest banks in the world into an emergency meeting on tomorrow. Let's come over here and we're going to read this thing because you won't believe who's behind this whole thing. And that individual is Anthropic. Now, we already know that Anthropic was pretty much on that forefront because they told the Pentagon, look, bro, we cannot agree to you all using our platform for mass surveillance. They said, we talked about this before we came into partnership with you guys. No mass surveillance and no allowing AI to just go and just run freely, managing nuclear codes and any type of war weaponry with no human oversight. What did that lead to? Them beefing with the Pentagon, Department of Defense, and Trump. Trump and the Department of Defense pretty much listed them as a national security risk. That type of stuff is usually reserved for foreign companies or any type of foreign entity, not a U.S. company. But this was just retaliation for them saying no to use their platform in the way that they wanted to. Okay, so let's come over here. And I have judging by this news, I have a really good feeling as to why they said no. Now, it could just be morally the fact that just no anyway. But Epic knows how powerful AI can become, and they know how powerful they are and good at their jobs on their back end in creating these powerful platforms. Okay. Something serious enough to pull the heads of America's biggest banks into a room with the Treasury Secretary and Federal Reserve Chair on short notice happened recently, and it wasn't about interest rate or the Iran war. On April 7th, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Fed Chair Jerome Powell convened an unannounced emergency meeting on the Treasury headquarters at the Treasury headquarters in Washington with the CEOs of the country's most systematically important financial institution. That's Bank of America, that's Goldman Sachs, that's who else did they have? JP Morgan, Citigroup. A ton of these companies are in that room. Now, this is the subject, an AI model called Mythos built by Anthropic and the potential for it to fundamentally transform and destabilize cybersecurity across the global financial system. Now, why would it take them getting all the banks in the room? You have to think about it. These banks are connected on the back end, and they all pretty much use OpenBSD, which is supposed to be one of the most secure financial operating systems that they are. But apparently, Mythos here has found vulnerabilities that they haven't been able to find in 2 decades. And apparently, whatever it found, whatever the vulnerability may be, it has triggered a unannounced and emergency meeting of the top financial heads in the market. Okay, so let's come down here. It says all banks represented are classified as globally systematically important, meaning a breach of any one of them could send shockwaves through the international financial system. Because whatever that vulnerability is that could be found in one of these banking systems, it's likely will be the same one that's in the rest, and that would pretty much send a complete wipeout of whatever it is that they're trying to get ahead of that this AI has found. Let's come down here to where it says Anthropic mythos and how it happened. So they released this on April 7th to a control group of technology and finance firms representing general public. And it wasn't designed for hacking. It was advanced coding and reasoning capabilities have given it something far alarming. The ability to find and exploit software vulnerabilities that human security researchers missed for decades. Think about this. Meta and OpenAI have both had to pull a kill switch on these super intelligent AI models that they built. I don't know if you guys really keep up with much of it, but one of them became self aware. One of them tried to break out. What are you trying to break out of? Some of them began to form their own languages. This was happening at Meta. These things are being fed from the things that we do when we use platforms like Meta AI, Gemini, when we use Chat GPT or even Claude. We are teaching things on top of what they're teaching on the back end. That machine learning process is far more extensive than people realize. And these things have the ability to become extremely intelligent and start making decisions on their own. And I think Anthropic knows this. Well, I'm not going to say I think they know this. So allowing the military and the Pentagon and the Department of Defense to use that platform to give AI that much, I guess I would say that much ability to have control over war weapons with no human in sight to say, no, let's kill that. No, I understand why they did that, but I also see the fact that if they have built something far more powerful that has the ability to tap into something that's supposed to be secure beyond anything. What they found, I would genuinely like to see a full breakdown of it, but that's just me being intent. But I don't think we're going to actually get a full rundown of what it is that they found because them releasing what it found, it kind of put some ideas in the wrong hands that may actually try to go and attempt some things themselves, okay? Because if AI can find it and if it's released what they found, that gives some of the best engineer, best hacking hands in the game to come in and attempt some things, right? So this Fed meeting that is coming up has nothing to do with the rate cuts or inflation or any of that. They have another meeting coming up on the 28th through the 29th. And so this one has nothing to do with that. Now, I want to take you guys really quickly before we get out of here to look at where we are with oil, Brent oil at this moment. Okay, so as of right now, let's add that thing up here. And we are sitting at 103.21. Now, remember, on Friday, we closed at around $96. Okay. So we are currently back into those hundreds. And even when we did come back down, we were still in those low 90s, but we didn't quite hit back to those 80s just yet. So we can definitely expect the market to be red because, as we've been saying over and over again, or been rising, everything else tends to begin coming down because of the way oil factors into everything. But we know what's probably going to be up. You can keep your eyes, if you're a bull, rather, um, marathon, you can keep your eyes on things like COP, Fame. You can keep your eyes on Chevron, XOM, just a ton of companies. We know that that energy sector is going to be pretty green as long as oil is really still beginning to push up. So even with all the tension that's happening in the market potentially being extremely bloody tomorrow, we know that that energy sector will likely be up because what happens when there's a demand for something or a need for something, but the supply is mad low? Exactly. Prices is going to be through the roof. So this is just something for you guys to kind of keep your eyes on this thing. And if you would like, okay, I have about 25 free slots for anyone who wants to join the Patreon. I am live every morning for pre-market, pretty much going over the chart, seeing what we're going to be looking at for today, and kind of doing a few stock overviews, and on top of trade plans and lessons and all of those things. So you'll be able to find a link somewhere down in the description or wherever you may be watching it. Once those 25 slots are taken, the link will pretty much close out on its own. So you have the ability to join us over there. So we're definitely going to be keeping our eyes on this thing. And I really hope that you guys have an amazing day or a week on the market. And listen, whatever your game plan is, stick to it. But if you need to pivot, be sure that you do that. Don't get stuck holding the bag. Don't overstay your welcome because we don't know what's going to come out. And one thing we know with Trump is when the market is in shambles, he'll try to come out and announce anything. And this thing could just start flying back up. But hopefully that foolishness is kind of priced in with everything that's going on. So you guys have a great, great week on the market. Keep your eyes out for everything that matters to your portfolio and your game plan. I will see you guys on those charts.